Hello friends, I hope you had a very good day. This is Binit. Welcome to my YouTube channel Techies Hub. So today's video is all about some of the top Selenium interview questions that you can expect while attending an interview. So I have gone through many of the websites in the internet and I could see there are so many repeatedly asking interview questions in their websites. So they might have some of the questions, but I could see the most of the questions that they are providing are not asked in any of the interviews right now. Now the interviewers wants to know how you think logically and how you can respond to some of the challenges that they have faced and how you can provide a solution to the scenarios that they ask. Now they are asking mostly about the real-time scenarios and how quickly you can respond to the uh, questions that they ask. So based on my experience, I have collected some questions which will be new to you for someone and which someone might have already encountered. So in this video, I am only talking about the interview questions and I'm not providing any answers. So just go through my questions and if you still feel that you are not able to find the right answer, just put your question in the comments and I will respond to that comment. So let's not waste any more time. Let's go into the questions. Just one second. Okay, so we'll go to the first question. So you might have heard the concept of DOM and HTML. So I have an element which can be identified using ID. So I want you to write a code to identify an element in DOM and another code to identify an element in HTML. So it's that simple. So I need a code to find an element using ID in DOM and HTML. So that's my first question. So moving on to the second question. So you might have all used the Selenium java.jar and Selenium standalone server.jar. But what's the purpose of those using all these jar files? What is the actual difference between all these jar files? So that's one of the question. And if I am running my Selenium code in my local machine and I am not using the Selenium standalone server.jar, so what will happen? Will my code execute or will it throw an error? So moving on to the third question, it's all about the drop downs. So I have a drop down with 20 elements in the drop down. So I want to retrieve the count of the elements in the drop down. So there may be 2 to 3 ways to retrieve the count, but find out the easiest way so that the interviewer will be impressed by the way you talk about the solution. So once you get the count, so there is my second question. So how to identify whether the drop down is multi-select or not? So if you get a drop down, if you can only select one, then it's a single select, and if you can select more than one, then it's a multi-select. But what is the easiest way to find that whether the drop down is multi-select or not? And the third question, so if the drop down is multi-select, how can I select more than one value from the multi-select drop down? And the fourth question, how to identify the first selected value from a multi-select drop-down. So these are the questions related to the drop-down. Moving on to the question 4. So I have 10 checkboxes in a page and I want to click on alternate checkboxes. So the scenario is like I have 10 checkboxes. If I click on the one, then I want to click on the third checkbox, then the fifth checkbox, then the seventh checkbox and the ninth checkbox. So that's it. Moving on to the fifth question. So you know about the implicit weights and explicit weight. So I want to check whether an element exists or not without using any weights. So how can I do that? I should not use any weights, but then also I should find out whether an element exists or not. So moving on to the sixth question, there is an action clause. In some of the scenarios, the action class will end with .build, and in some other, it will end with .perform. So why are we using these two different methods in the action class? So what is the purpose of using .build and .perform in action classes? Moving on to question 7. I have a date field with some value, but the date field is non-editable. But I want to provide tomorrow's date. So is it possible? So how can I change the value of a non-editable field? Moving to the question 8. Similarly, I have some hidden elements in my HTML. So hidden elements means it is difficult to do action on the hidden elements since they are hidden. So how can I handle the hidden elements in the HTML? The question number 9 is related to the test ng. So there is something called invocation count and thread pool size. Some of you have heard about the invocation count. So what is this invocation count? And what is this thread pool size? And how they are interrelated? Question number 10. What are some of the differences between XPath and CSS? In which scenarios we will be using XPath and which scenarios we will be using CSS? So why can't we replace the XPath with CSS? And why can't we replace the CSS with XPath in some cases? Moving on to 11. So there are something called XPath access. So what is the difference between ancestor and parent XPath access? And similarly, what is the difference between descendant and child XPath accesses? So there are so many other XPath accesses, but I want you guys to concentrate on all these for XPath access. So moving on to the question number 12, what is implicit wait and how it is different from explicit wait? So when we will be using the implicit wait and when we will be using the explicit wait. So if you know about this implicit wait, then I want to create a method of my own without using any explicit wait so that I can find whether an element exists or not. So I should not use an explicit wait, but I can use any other function other than the thread dot sleep, and I want to create a method of my own. So is it possible? So moving on to the next question. I have something WebDriver wait equal to new WebDriver wait of driver.com 10. So what will this do? If I use this independently, whether it is of any use to the tester, or do I have to use something along with this? So that's a question. And the question 14, what is max session and max instance in Selenium? So if you're working on Selenium guide, you might have heard about max session and max instance. So what is the main difference between max session and max instance in Selenium? And I am using the Selenium grid and I have multiple nodes, but I want each node to wait for only 10 seconds to initiate the test. If it cannot initiate the test within the 10 seconds, I want it to be failed. So how can I achieve this? So moving on to the 16th question. So I have a web page, but I want to refresh it. So what are the different ways with which I can refresh a page? I can assure you there are more than 2 ways, maybe more than 3 ways. But the question is, what are the different ways we can refresh a page? And the 17th question is like, I have a page where I want to right click and I have to select an option from the menu, the easy way. There may be so many ways, but I want to find it the easy way. The scenario is simple, right click, select an option, just that's it. So moving on to the question 18, how can I find out the coordinate of an element and click on it? So in some cases, it's just like the requirement. I want to click on a particular position. So how can I find out the coordinate of an element and click on it? And moving on to the question number 19. There are so many exceptions in the Selenium, but what is this no session found exception and stale element exception? So when will we get this no session found exception? And when can you expect the stale element exception? Moving on to question 20. So I have so many tests in a class and I want to run all the tests using a different dataset. How can I run all the tests in a class using an annotation or a method, something? So that is something possible in TestNG. So what is that? Moving on to question number 21. So I have a Chrome browser and I don't want to add any extension to identify the XPath and CSS of an element. So how can I do that? Is it possible in Chrome without an extension to find the XPath and CSS? So how can you identify XPath and CSS in Chrome without using any extension? So moving on to question number 22. They can ask, what are some of the challenges related to Selenium you encountered in your project? So this what the interviewer is trying to find out is actually you have worked on the Selenium project. If you have gone to a website and if you have read from the website, then you might not be able to answer some real challenges that you have faced. So always try to get one or two challenges that you have faced in this project that you can mention in this in when the interviewer asks this question. And the question number 23 is like, I have an element which contains an ID attribute. That ID is split by two parts. So, and the first part is a constant and second part is changing, and it is splitted by an underscore. So how do you find that element is using an ID 613? So simple question like. And moving on to the question 24, how can I write a code to press Ctrl Alt Delete? So you might be saying it is an easy thing with action class, but have you tried writing the code to press Ctrl Alt Delete? Just try it. And the 25th question. So in my Windows application, I am using Selenium. I want to open a notepad or a calculator. Is it possible with Selenium? Or is it possible with using something along with Selenium? Yes, it is possible. So what is it? What can we use with Selenium that which we can interact with the Windows application like Notepad, calculator, etc. So these are all the questions that I have. Now moving on to scenario. So I have around 3 to 4 scenarios which I want you guys to just think through it and come up with an answer. So the first scenario is I want to find an element from the table which has pagination, but I don't know how many pages are there. The page will vary, and I don't know in which page the element comes. So maybe it come in the first page. So what if it doesn't come in the first page? So what should I do? And how can I know whether there is only one page? And how can I know whether I have reached the last page? So these are the things that you have to consider. But my scenario is I want to find an element from a table which has pagination, and I'm not sure what's the total number of pages in the table. Moving on to the second question. I have three windows and I have to go to one window and I have to click on a button, but I am not sure in which window the button is. So that's the question. So when you hear it, you will say I will use switch windows and all those things, get window handles and all those things. But what if the element is not there in the first window? So will my test fail there? No, it should go to the second window. So how can I handle that? So that's my scenario second. Moving on to my scenario 3. So I have a table with many rows and I have the column like project name, project description, button and project code. So I can either give my project name as project 1 or I can give my project code as 10011, and I have a button plus button. So if I give the project name, if I give the project code, I want that corresponding button in the row to be clicked. That means if I give the project name as project 1, the button plus should be clicked from the first row. If I give the project code as 10011, I want to be the plus button to be clicked from the second row. So I want you guys to try to create one XPath which will do this action. So if I give the project name, if I give the project code, it does not matter. Whatever I give, I should be able to click on the plus button of that corresponding row. So that's my third scenario. And the fourth scenario, so I have used an extension in the Firefox and I have found an element using the extension. And I use the same in the code. But while running the script, the element is not getting identified correctly. So what could be the reasons that you bring from this scenario? So you might be knowing what could be causing this issue. So we are asking you to tell us some of the reasons for this behavior. And the last question that most of the team ask, so what is the framework that you are using now? So there are so many different frameworks available in the market, but why are you using this framework? And what are the 5 highlights of your framework that makes your framework better than the other framework? And the last question is like, consider that you are doing your application in C# or Java, and now they are changing the application to Angular. So what are the things that you are going to do when this change happens? How do you handle these situations? So they want to know how you will be taking up the challenges and how you will be coming out of this. So these are the questions that will make sure that you understand everything and you are having much depth knowledge in the Selenium. So I guess that's pretty much all about the Selenium interview questions that I have. Thank you guys for watching my video and have a good day. Bye.